Hello, friends. As you may already know, most immigrants who come to live in Montenegro open companies solely to obtain a residence permit. No business activity is actually conducted through these companies. In other words, for immigrants, essentially all their income is off the books. Today, we'll talk about how companies operate in Montenegro and why it might be worth channeling at least part of your income through the company you've opened. And there are the following reasons for this. There are a few reasons. The first is the pension. Yes, you can open a company in Montenegro, employ yourself at a quarter-time rate, and pay only 30 euros in taxes per month. In other words, it's basically peanuts, especially if you compare these expenses to other European countries. But the thing is, in order to receive a pension in the future, you need to have worked in Montenegro for at least 15 years at a full-time rate, not a quarter, but full-time. So accordingly, you'll need to pay not 30 euros in taxes, but 4 times that amount. By the way, again, even if you pay 4 times the possible minimum, it's still basically nothing. But at the same time, you get the right to a future, the right to a pension in the future. Yes, I know the common argument that a pension isn't really worth it. It's more profitable to invest your money in something else. You'll earn more that way. And you don't need a pension at all. You'll provide for your own life in old age. Let's be honest, that's a good argument, and I agree with it. You can invest well, you can invest smartly, you can invest more profitably than giving part of your income to the government. But let's be honest, when 2 or 3 decades pass and you reach retirement age, most of you will probably find that you didn't invest anything at all, you just spent it all. That's why I think that having some kind of pension by old age won't hurt anyone, at the very least, because you have to pay for it after all, you have to pay for the right to receive it in the future, and in fact, it's not even that much money. Why not do it? Second, you can, in principle, well, if, for example, you don't channel all your income through the company, but only part of it, which in fact many people do, you can basically just pay taxes on your salary and nothing else. You won't have to pay VAT or profit taxes. So if you receive some minimal amounts, for example, just enough to pay yourself a salary and the associated salary taxes, then you'll be paying about 120 euros in taxes per month. But in return, you gain the right to a pension. I want to emphasize again that this will only be beneficial for you. Montenegro is striving to join the EU. And sooner or later, Montenegro will start comparing your income with your expenses. This is, in principle, absolutely correct. I think you've often heard, unfortunately, from our fellow countrymen that Montenegro isn't quite as great a part of Europe yet as, for example, Spain or France. In France, this has been in effect for a long time. They have long compared your income with your expenses there as well. And in principle, it's the same in all European countries, and it will be the same in Montenegro. I think this will happen quite soon. Therefore, in order not to be afraid that you will be taken for granted when you make some major purchase, buy, for example, a good car or a new apartment, that's why you need to start paying some taxes, and start doing it, if not today, then at least tomorrow. Of course, it's a voluntary matter, but I would strongly recommend it to everyone. Currently, in Montenegro, there is a law under consideration that when purchasing real estate or movable property worth 50,000 euros or more, you will have to prove where you got the money from. The law hasn't been passed yet, but it's clear that it's only a matter of time. There's been a lot of noise about this law. People have been saying that politicians want to use it to go after their political opponents. But in reality, this law is very reasonable. And I can say that compared to other European countries, and especially compared to the USA, it is very lenient. Here, under this law, if you are unable to explain where your money came from, in other words, if your income is unreported and you don't have legal income and you can't justify the source of your funds, for example, you bought an apartment for 100,000, but your official income, like most people, is only 112 euros a month. The tax authorities summon you and ask, where did the money come from? You earn less than 1,500 euros a year, but you bought an apartment for 100,000 euros. Where did the money come from? At the same time, according to the current draft law, it's still just a draft. I don't know what will happen when it's passed. Things might change, but for now, it stipulates that if you essentially bought an apartment with stolen money, or more precisely didn't pay taxes, which is basically like stealing from the state, then this property is simply confiscated in favor of the state. There was a lot of noise about this law, about this draft law. Everyone was outraged. But in fact, if you compare it to other European countries, this law is actually quite lenient. In the US or in some Western European countries, not only will they confiscate property acquired with illegally obtained income, but they'll also put you in jail. Here, for now, there is no talk of imprisonment. For now, it's simply about confiscating your property. So, compared to the US, the law is very, very lenient, and the same goes for some Western European countries. Nevertheless, there are already such attempts so far only for major purchases. They're already asking you where the money came from. Obviously, in other countries, again, things are much stricter. There, if you simply spend a lot every month, they can also ask you where the money came from. Here, things are still more lenient for now, but it's all heading in that direction anyway. And so, probably for now, those with a small income don't need to worry. But for those who have a good income, who can imagine themselves buying some valuable property in the foreseeable future, it's probably time to start thinking about this and again, to start paying at least some taxes into the budget. Now, let's talk about what is required for companies to operate if you want or decide to do business in Montenegro. Of course, I won't describe all possible options right now. That would make for a rather lengthy video. Let's talk about what comes up most often, what you encounter every day, what you see practically at every turn, using programming companies as an example. There is a huge number of Russians, Ukrainians, and other IT specialists living in Montenegro, and some of them are now starting to channel their income through their own companies. This is especially true for Russian programmers, since, due to the special military operation conducted by Russia in Ukraine, many have lost income from Western clients. In other words, clients no longer agree to pay to Russian bank cards or by other shady means. So people have started accepting payments to their company accounts in Montenegro. What is required for this? First of all, you need to open two types of accounts. In Montenegro, there is a domestic račun and a motor račun. A domaći račun is like a regular bank account in Russia used for domestic transactions. And the devizni račun is, in our terms, a transit account, which is needed for international transactions. If the company is in programming, then 100% of its clients are predominantly or entirely foreign. So, accordingly, you need an account to work with these foreign clients. So, you open two types of accounts. Second, you will need a fiscalization program. In Montenegro, if I'm not mistaken about the dates, I believe the fiscalization law came into effect in June of last year. And accordingly, you either issue a receipt or simply invoice through some other company. All of this must go through the tax authorities. That is, the invoice you issue to your counterparty is automatically registered with the tax office using this program. Then you give it to your counterparty and they pay you. There are different programs available, including free ones. I tried testing a couple of free programs, but they didn't work for me. Well, basically, as they say, that was to be expected. I personally use the post-fiscal program. It costs 12 euros and 10 cents per month. But there are different pricing plans. For me, this particular plan is the most optimal. So that's the one I chose. That's it. So again, basically, it's not a lot of money over the course of a year. It comes out to about 150 euros. Now, the most important question, taxes. Good news. Actually, I would even say it's excellent news when exporting services. You don't have to pay VAT. Since everyone living here who works in I-12, the majority, almost everyone, or at least 99% as foreign clients, you are exporting services, so you don't pay VAT. That's fantastic news. So, what taxes do you pay? You pay two types of taxes. The first is payroll taxes, and the second is tax on dividends. How do you receive money? So you've provided some services and received money into your company's account. That's great, but you still can't actually buy anything with it yet. You need to transfer the money from the company account to your personal account. How do you do that? There are two options. The first is to pay yourself a salary, but there are taxes involved. The minimum taxes apply. If the salary is gross, there is gross salary and net salary. Net is what you actually receive, while gross includes taxes. That's it. The minimum taxes apply if the gross salary does not exceed 700 euros. Now, I read you a few examples. You can also pay yourself a higher salary, but then the taxes will be higher. So if the salary does not exceed 700 euros, that is, the gross salary is 700 euros, in this case, you receive 591 euros net. You can see the table on the screen. Here you can see that a total of 745 euros is debited from the company account, of which 591 euros you receive in hand. The rest is taxes. If the salary is 2,000 euros, then you receive 1,503 euros net, and the rest goes to taxes. Again, when the salary is 2,000 euros, a higher coefficient is applied, so the taxes are higher. That's it. So the minimum taxes apply when the salary does not exceed 700 euros. And the third example I want to consider now, the salary is 3,000 euros. So you receive 2,208 euros in hand, and 3,228 euros are written off from the company. Again, to repeat, out of that amount, 2,208 euros is what you actually receive. So roughly speaking, that's about 1,000 euros in taxes for this kind of salary. Yes. Now, let's talk about dividends. Dividends are taxed. When you receive dividends, you pay a profit tax. The profit tax rate is differentiated. The minimum rate is 9% if your annual profit does not exceed 100,000 euros. I won't go over all the possible scenarios right now. Let's imagine that you have a standard software development company, which, like most companies of this type, earns less than 100,000 euros per year. Accordingly, let's look at dividends from this kind of amount. I have an example. You can see it on the screen. In this example, the profit is 50,000 euros. And accordingly, here are the various taxes you pay, this and that. And in the end, you receive 37,301 euros in hand. That's it. So what am I trying to say? How to withdraw money for yourself in the most cost-effective way? The optimal option is when you have some savings to get you through to the end of the year and then receive the main amount as dividends. Dividends are paid once a year, while salary is paid monthly. So pay yourself a small salary up to 700 euros. You'll actually receive about 591 euros in hand, let's round it up to 600. That's about 7,200 euros per year. And you receive the remaining amount at the end of the year as dividends. This is the most optimal way if you have savings to get by until the dividends are paid, which happens in the first quarter of each year. You can receive them in January then. In principle, this is really the best option. If, unfortunately, you don't have any savings, then you'll probably have to pay yourself a higher salary, and, well, the taxes will also be higher, since for salaries over 700 euros, there's an increased coefficient. And if your salary exceeds 1,000 euros, there's yet another increased coefficient. Accordingly, your expenses will be higher. Yes. What can be deducted from the taxable base? Well, for example, of course, you can't deduct your living expenses. That is, you can't write off your rent for your apartment, groceries, or any other such things. But there are many things you can deduct. Among the major ones, for example, you can deduct a car. So you can buy a car in Montenegro if you have a residence permit, either as an individual or through your company. If you buy it through your company, then you don't pay profit tax, and you don't pay tax on receiving dividends. In other words, you save about 24%, which is quite significant. So being able to buy a car even a quarter cheaper is just wonderful. But there's another important point I want to discuss. When you tell Russian people about dividends, for example, you explain it to them, so you pay a 9% profit tax, then you receive a certain amount and transfer it as dividends. On that amount, you pay another 15%. So in total, it comes out to almost 24%. Russians say, what is this? How is this even possible? Here in Russia, we used to paying 6 or 9%. Friends, throughout all of Europe, taxes are much higher than what sole proprietors, private entrepreneurs pay in Russia. So the question is, do you want to live in Russia or do you want to live in Europe? If you want to live in Russia, no problem. You can stay there, pay 6 or 9%, and, well, enjoy every day of your life. If you want to live in Europe, then accordingly you need to be prepared to pay somewhat more. And by European standards, the rates in Montenegro are very low. Show me another European country where the taxes are as low as they are in Montenegro. Honestly, I don't know of any such country. I actually doubt that one exists. That's it. So, in terms of taxation, our country Montenegro are quite competitive with all the civilized countries. If you will, either you're ready for this or you're not. If you're not ready, that's perfectly fine. Life in Russia and low taxes or 9%, very low taxes. So, where can you find a Russian accountant in Montenegro? Well, here you go. I'm a Russian accountant in Montenegro. And if you need services for your companies, if you need to open a company in Montenegro, or if you need help obtaining a residence permit, you can always contact me. My name is Dimitri. All my contact information is in the description of this video. Goodbye, everyone.